I kind of set up, our conversation there in that intro. But clearly, Cisco is thinking a lot about the future. And in particular, you're thinking about a future that I think has probably two dimensions. And one is the wireless future, and the other is the broadband, high-intensity, high-bandwidth demand future. So can you tell us some of the kinds of things that are driving your thinking at Cisco when you think about those futures?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the profound changes that we think we will see in the next decade is the internet actually changing from just being a vehicle for connectivity or being an information highway as we've all developed, and Cisco obviously benefited a lot from driving that, to really becoming a platform that transforms industries, right? So in other words, it sort of was moving from fixed access to more mobile access, the mobile internet as we call it, to in the future becoming more an industrial internet as we call, which means there'll be multiple sets of devices, numerous kinds of sensors that will connect to it, whether it's in applications like smart grid, which is going to transform energy utilization and applying some of the same principles of IP networks for the grid, or in transforming cities. One of the major bets that we are making is in city transformation and how public sector services and citizen services from government can be delivered using the network as a platform. All the way to the role video is going to play in driving collaboration. We started off Cisco Telepresence, which you've seen and used.
Yeah. By the way, just a comment here. You hear that term, you say, oh, I've seen video conferencing, but if you ever get a chance to go in a Cisco Telepresence room, do it. It is a truly remarkable experience. It's you feel like you get up and shake the hand of the person you're sitting opposite.
Yeah, it's a very immersive experience. You sort of get the same experience as we do having this conversation face to face. Initially, we launched it as a B2B experience for companies and enterprises to get together, work together. Now we are seeing actually a lot of application in healthcare, for example, for doctors to interact with patients or for one doctor to interact with another doctor. In education, we've deployed Telepresence at Duke University, where actually one of the lecture theaters is being transformed with Telepresence. So professors or experts from any part of the world actually now can come into the classroom virtually and deliver the subject matter. So I think there's be a lot of new applications around video and how video is going to be utilized in many different verticals.
So in the current telepresence rooms, it really is an immersive room. You can have, sort of a dozen people perhaps in the first rank. You have some other people who are spectators, not quite as immersive. But that's really not the same thing as having, a large audience. And yet you did one, I think, a high-profile demo on stage where it literally was a sort of Star Trek kind of, or Star Wars kind of experience with the, the sort of walking hologram. That was obviously not a commercial product yet. How far away is that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we're just seeing the beginnings of it. I think one of the things that we are beginning to do as a company is change our own use of telepresence. And we used to, about 2 years ago, always have the sales conference once a year, where we used to bring all of the sales team within Cisco to be in a physical meeting, whether it was in Las Vegas or San Francisco. In the last 2 years, we've done that virtually, where we are now connecting almost 20,000 people worldwide virtually using telepresence and other forms of video conferencing. By the way, we acquired Tandberg, and we are integrating the Tandberg solution into it. We'll be launching a home telepresence, where if you have a high-density television at home, you can extend that or use that as a way to do a telepresence from your home. And many people, of course, in a lot of developed countries and actually emerging countries today, have access to HDTV at home. And so how can you use that technology not just for streaming or broadcast content, but actually for you to deliver?
Right, and obviously this requires some different network architecture. You certainly can't have, fat pipe coming down, thin pipe going up. for that kind of experience.
Exactly. And I think back to your original question, we started off with broadband penetration. I think that's something that's essential to make all of this a reality. But I think that's really where the internet is going, is to actually drive these very media-rich, real-time, synchronous types of communication, which will lead into many different ways we'll collaborate in the future.
One of the things that I find interesting to think about, and I don't know if you guys have pursued this market, but I've wondered if telepresence is an interesting opportunity for libraries to make that a public utility. You know, we tend to think of a library as a place where you have books, but in a lot of ways it's a community asset, a collection of resources that are, you know, too expensive for many individuals. And, you know, well, this would be a fabulous shared resource for governments to make available to their citizens, so that you can have that kind of contact. Again, eventually we'll have it in the home, but in the short term, you know, you wonder if that would be a new use for public libraries.
No, I know you mentioned this to me, and that's why I thought that was a very innovative idea. I think it's a great suggestion. One of the early traction we are seeing is actually in the hospitality industry, where a lot of the hotels worldwide are now deploying telepresence suites. And you can kind of use that as a service, right? You can go and use that as a service. And I talked about universities using it. Actually, schools as well. Also, remote education in many of the emerging markets. We're beginning to see kiosks set up, and libraries would be another extension of that, right? Because most even smaller communities have access to a public library, and if you can set up a kiosk with telepresence there, that can be a way to access whatever you're trying to get to, you know, whether it's a doctor, access to a doctor or a hospital or a teacher. The home telepresence, I think, is going to be really interesting, and I think we'll see applications probably even we haven't thought of, but a couple of things that I think will be very interesting once you have home telepresence is things like senior care. If you have senior parents or people that you want to take care of, and you can enable that interaction or the care for the seniors from home to happen through telepresence or to their television, I think that will be a key life.
Well, already you see a lot of people doing that with Skype video. Just a much lower
but now
level.
for doctors, right? You know, in many cases for medical professionals, they need to have high resolution imaging and access to information. So I think our vision is to sort of how do we integrate this set of applications that have all evolved in the last decade to be separate, right? Text-based, voice-based, video-based applications.
So is Cisco looking at all at the area of telepresence robots? I've played around with the Wheeler Garage robots, and it's a pretty fabulous experience to be able to drive a screen around a gathering and interact with people. Is that something you guys are thinking about?
I think the applications we are targeting tend to be more around business productivity improvement, education, healthcare. I think where we can perhaps think of a productivity enhancing with the area of robotics could be in the manufacturing vertical.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and actually we're looking even in the retail sector of perhaps having, there's an ad, a very cute ad that we did. It's a conceptual ad that's posted on YouTube that talks about the future of shopping experience, where there's two young ladies who are shopping, and you can actually do virtual change of clothing and things like that. I think that's where more of the extensions that you're talking about, perhaps in the manufacturing vertical or retail vertical, that will come into play.
So you're on the National Research Council Committee on Higher Ed. So you focusing in your input to that on this sort of video education aspect, or are there other areas that you...
Yeah, that group has been charted to come up with a set of recommendations on what needs to happen for the United States to maintain our competitive edge in higher education, right? So university education and postgraduate and research education. So we're primarily looking at everything from the supply chain as well as the demand side, and how my focus especially is what role does technology play in transforming education itself, not just the consumption of education, as I was talking about earlier, perhaps with telepresence or others, but are there other ways we can actually use technology to make education a much more efficient process than it is today? So we are exploring everything on the agenda from how do we help universities to stay competitive in delivering education? What role do universities play in doing advanced research?
Yeah.
How does that consumed by companies? What role do companies like Cisco or
Yeah.
Intel or HP play in that?
Let me bring up a story that I think we really need to think about. There's a group called Synoikasis. It's a classics term. It was actually the name of a federation on the island of Lesbos that fought the Athenians. But it's also today it's a collection of, I think, 19 or 20 small southern colleges that got together to form a virtual classics department. Because what they realized was that if you're the only classics professor at a small college, you get to teach introductory Latin and Greek. And they decided to get together. They now really, I think they're the largest classics department in the country because they are, in fact, this virtual institution. But the story that was so interesting to me was that they received a large grant. I think it was from Mellon. And the dean of one of the schools said to one of the principals of this organization, he said, "What's in it for us?" Because what had happened was that there was this new horizontal organization enabled by the internet that didn't actually belong to any of the individual institutions. And one of the, again, thinking about the future, you have to ask, how does networking change our institutions? Synoikasis is this organization that spans 20 colleges and therefore becomes independent of them.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. Actually, that happens even in business, right? I don't know if you know this. Cisco as a company itself is run very differently. We are organized functionally as a company. There's an engineering team, sales team, et cetera, but the entire company is run through this exact concept you're talking about, horizontal groups that make decisions. And our notion is more and more if you're driving collaboration, you have to have the ability of bringing experts together both within the company and from outside the company to drive initiatives and drive transformation. In the higher education space, actually, we work with a lot of the large universities worldwide. But in the United States, I had an opportunity to talk with many of the CIOs and academic leaders in universities recently. And if you talk to those experts in that field, their view is a key differentiation for a university or an educational institution is the knowledge creation and knowledge sharing, right? But they spend a lot of time today using technology for things like admissions process and how, a lot of administrative things. So if we can somehow remove that burden, perhaps deliver that as a cloud service, then the universities really can create this virtual body of experts that they deliver, right? And I think there's always still room, of course, for a place that is an educational place, right? So everything can be virtual. I think there's a lot of value an educational institution gives you in terms of the social skills and who you're with when you're a student, et cetera. And so a university can really focus on creating that atmosphere on campus and then delivering knowledge that is much more horizontal. A lot of the administrative, you can think of it as non-value added type of work can be consolidated into a cloud service that can be delivered. So I think there's a structural changes also that we would have to drive. And we are working on how can we help them make that transformation.
I was just thinking, I know we don't have a mic out in the audience, but could we get one? Because we probably do have time for a question or two. So maybe bring a mic out to the middle and get a couple of people up there if you want to ask questions. I want to ask you a little bit about Cisco's Smart Cities initiative. That's something you guys are talking about. What do you mean by that? How do you think our cities are going to change?
Yeah, one of the big challenges that we see happening on a global basis, I would say, they're related, but the big challenge that many countries today have is economic growth, how they can use technology and innovation to drive economic growth. At the same time, they're faced with this huge challenge of urbanization, right? And all the data about 700 million people migrating to cities over the next few years. There'll be 100 new cities with over 1 million people worldwide, et cetera. So there's a huge urbanization issues that many countries are going through. And I think the challenge is as you build these new cities, how can we be smart about building these cities or creating the physical infrastructure with the ICT infrastructure together So we are doing a lot of pilots with many cities around the world. For example, Songdo in South Korea, which is a city that is built in the Incheon region. And in the agreement, we're working with the developer. Usually when cities are created, it's the architects and the physical infrastructure, and technology is something that's last on the list. And this time we're trying to change that and say, if you think about technology to be an integral part of how a city is built, then you can deliver a lot of services virtually, right? Healthcare, intelligent transportation, education, even citizen services.
So could you get specific? So we built this smart city of the future. Draw a picture for us of what it's like to live there. What's different about it?
Yeah. So for example, and by the way, it's not just cities of future. We're actually extending that now into what we call, and it's not a very glamorous term, but brownfield cities, existing cities. How can we enable them, right? For Holyoke in Massachusetts, we're doing a project there in helping that city as well. So it's both existing cities as well as new cities. But if you're really improving this experience, think of an experience where perhaps you'll get an alert saying there's traffic congestion today going into downtown Washington. And if you're thinking of being at this conference, perhaps don't drive, but maybe stay in your home and use consumer telepresence or telepresence to be part of the conference. Or if you don't have access to consumer telepresence, perhaps go to a kiosk, right? Or something that's out of a city and then plug into the conference. That would be one example.
So isn't this already happening bottom up? We have all kinds of transit apps that are, in fact, showing us traffic. Right. We don't actually need to instrument the city in new ways because we are getting that crowdsourced data from people's mobile phones, for example. Yeah,
it's happening in pieces. It's not integrated onto a platform, right? So if you do get an alert, you don't know what to do about that alert. And what do you do if you know that there's a traffic congestion? I think what we are trying to do with Smart Connected Cities is develop a platform that sort of integrates all of these. So you can have that integrated experience of providing tutoring for your kids at home, or basically limiting the need for physical transportation.
All right, looks like we have a mic. So if anybody does have a question, head up the middle. And if not, I'm going to keep on this smart cities thing. So what about sort of sensors? Because when I think about smart cities, I do think about things like street lights that don't go on a timer, but they just know when it's dark, and they also know when they're out, and they report in. I think about you certainly could imagine more traffic congestion. You think about the possibility for the power grid being smarter. You think about say there certainly are the potential for experiences in the city of public spaces that are internet aware in different ways. And for that matter, I mean, actually, I hope we can show a picture later. That Washington, D.C. has put free Wi-Fi out in the mall, so you can be out there outside, and you don't have to actually be in a coffee shop. You can actually be outside and have that access to the internet. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But certainly going on and say I'm looking out there, I don't see anybody. Okay, so
it's hard to see. I think we need the lights up.
Yeah,
but I think so I think you're absolutely right. I think sensor networks is probably going to become a real application coming up very soon, right? So when we talk about the industrial internet and the evolution to the industrial internet, that's exactly what we are focusing on, right? So if you think of the network, right, what we need to do as a company, on the one hand, we have to deal with very high bandwidth, very real-time synchronous applications like telepresence, video, et cetera, big pipes, lots of information flowing through. On the other hand, when you think about smart grid or smart buildings or transportation, et cetera, it's multiple nodes, so small bursts of data, but continuous bursts of data coming into the network, and the network's ability to process that in a secure way, right? So it's sort of like almost two sets of challenges that the network now has to deal with. Right. And so there's a lot of innovation we are putting into our core switching and routing products, the core business of Cisco, to enable the extension of the intelligence in the network. And by the way, I think security becomes a key challenge as we talk about all these applications, right? Just simple notion that now people are bringing multiple devices into the network, into an enterprise application, and expect to have access to enterprise secure applications on any kind of a mobile device provides a challenge to many CIOs. Now think about that when you have multiple devices that are turning lights on and off and turning traffic systems on and off.
And sort of say you're at, I think this was something Vivek Kundra was looking at when he was the CTO in DC, was, can you get a building permit at Home Depot, at a kiosk, that's sort of placed there by the city, i.e. bringing IT out into the location, where people need it, as opposed to you have to come to City Hall, you have to come to the building department. Can we actually sort of infuse city services into the location?
Absolutely.
Where people need to encounter them?
Yeah.
So, okay. It looks like we do have a question from the floor. We are now over time, though, because it's taken us a while. So I think we just have time for the one.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you. Looking to see, great to hear what Cisco's doing. One of the fears the government has is the one-vendor solution. So I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about partnerships you have in moving forward.
Yeah, we totally believe in the fact that it has to be an ecosystem, so that the description, we have to be specific, but in the area of video, for example, Cisco Telepresence interoperates with other solutions. And same thing in collaboration. When we deploy an enterprise collaboration solution, our solution works with other forms of collaboration systems or from other vendors as well. Because if you think about city transformation and city services, there's going to be multiple sets of capabilities that we have to integrate. The value we see, what we can bring and the differentiation we can bring is the deep knowledge we have of the network, and we believe the network has to play a strong role in enabling security, privacy, policy decisions that have to be made as multiple devices connect, and there's actually now machine-to-machine communication as well as a machine-to-person communication, and the network is really the only place a lot of this information comes together.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think, my quick answer on that one is that the history of the internet shows us that interoperable networks beat closed networks every time. It's happened again and again, and I think as companies put forward proprietary solutions, they may look like they'll get some traction for a while, but we are going to end up with interoperability, because that is what makes networks work.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for coming.